Welcome to the Real Estate Secrets Podcast for healthcare professionals, hosted by Austin Hare and Nathan Palmer, who together have over 2 decades of real estate knowledge and investing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Commercial Real Estate Secrets. Today we have a guest named Blake Bozarth. He is the founder and the CEO of CoThryve, and he's the host of the Leadership on Purpose podcast, which has been ranked in the top 10 leadership podcasts on iTunes. So, hey, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Blake, how you doing, man?
Awesome. I'm doing great, man. It's an honor to be on with you.
Well, thanks very much. So, yeah, it's cool. I believe the first time we met was it 1 or 2 years ago now?
It was probably close to 2 years ago, but time has gotten so weird in the midst of this pandemic. So who knows exactly, but it was probably a couple of years ago.
2019 was like the shortest year ever, and 2020 was like the longest year ever.
No joke. No joke. But yeah.
So cool. So yeah, obviously you and I both have a lot of real estate interests in common. We both do Airbnb. I've got 2 properties right down here in Orlando, and you have 2 in Tennessee. Is that correct?
Yeah, 2 Airbnbs in Tennessee. So we used to live in Chattanooga and just moved down here a couple of years ago to be closer to family. My wife's from the Orlando area, so we moved down here. But yeah, and we have a small portfolio of rentals in Chattanooga, and then a couple of those are Airbnb properties, and big fans. We've done some scheming, some masterminding, the 2 of us, on how to optimize for short-term rentals, but big fans of it for the time that we got in. But as we've talked about, it's more and more difficult to break into these days. That's why we only have 2. We've only kept 2, but they've been really good for us.
Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting point. I follow a guy named Richard Fertig. He has a thing called the Short-Term Rental University. It's really interesting. I don't know. Have you heard of him?
I have not, actually.
So yeah, it's funny because I know you and I, we talked about, like, we feel like we got into Airbnb at a great time. I bought my first property in 2011, and that was the bottom of the market. You can't time it any better. Second one was 2015, and since then it just feels like the asset class has been getting more and more saturated. There's, one thing that makes Florida a double-edged sword is just the fact that you've got all these people coming down. So it's a good place to invest long term. Like, you are going to see a lot of increased value of your house just because we have lower taxes. The weather's really nice. We're open. A lot of other states are shutting down. We're receiving the benefit of all those types of things.
Yep.
But if you're not already in the market, and you're trying to invest in Airbnb, that really affects your cash flow. Because now, yeah, sure, you got an asset that'll appreciate over time, but it's not going to put food on your table every month. Like your mortgage expenses are a lot higher, and it's just, your amount of headache is the exact same, but your expenses are going up a lot. And so, especially, we had so many people invest in Airbnb properties for the past several years. Like in 2020, the investment really dried up. Like, new investment stopped in that market, but the inflow of people offset the lack of demand for short-term rentals. So yeah, it's been interesting. I think, like, after listening to Richard, though, he talks about how it's just like an underserved class, and there's not a whole lot of sophistication in there. Like, you get sophisticated, evolved markets like multifamily apartment complexes, and that's why you can secure like 2% interest rates on your loans and stuff like that. But you also know exactly how they're going to perform, and there's not a whole lot of upside left. Like, it's a very safe industry. It's a very safe part. But he was saying, like, you haven't seen institutional investments come into short-term rentals yet, and he thinks you will. So these groups come in and buy 10,000 homes, 15,000 homes at a time. And so that was interesting to me, because it was like, okay, maybe there's more to this than I give it credit for. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I mean, that's interesting. I'm with you. I think we're seeing some bigger players come in. Definitely bigger property managers, whether they're holding it or not. And I think there has been big opportunity for early adopters with it. But one of the things we've talked about, that it's hard to build a true strategy like that you want to scale around short-term rentals right now. In my opinion, that's my only concern is, and it's honestly mainly because of the ever-changing regulatory environment around it, and how municipalities look at it, and every one of them is different. So Chattanooga, we were on the front end of it. We actually helped shape it in some ways, but if somebody's making investments predicated on short-term rental, and it's not going to be a honestly a great investment, or it's going to struggle to cash flow from a long-term perspective if they had to flip out of it into another option. Or if it's just there's not enough margin in the deal for it to make sense to resell. If you're locked into a short-term rental strategy, to me it's a little bit concerning these days, just given how quickly things can change on the
Mhm.
regulatory landscape with the way cities essentially are regulating them these days.
Yeah, and I think, to elaborate on that a little bit, once cities and municipalities get a solidified plan, like a policy around short-term rentals, then you have clarity. But there's a lot of these places
That's
that
right.
don't have a policy yet, and that is really, really high risk. So I think that if you're going to a place that already has deemed short-term rentals as being legal and allowed, like for us, it would be Osceola County, which is the Disney area
Right.
here in Florida. They said that, hey, we're allowing short-term rentals, it's fine. Orange County has said, well, it's like only if you're in a residential district. And so essentially, I don't know how they divide residential versus commercial district. Like there's 3 or 4 districts, and to me, it looks totally random. Like there's plenty of residential districts that are zoned commercial by them. So you're not, no rhyme or reason to it. You're just not allowed to do an Airbnb there at all. So yeah, it's going to be really hard to reverse that. And I think it makes it a higher risk if you go to a place that doesn't have any policies yet, because once the policy is there, like in Osceola County, I mean, they're getting a taste of this revenue because you're getting this 12% short-term rental, vacation, tourist tax, whatever you want to call it, off every single booking. But cities are not going to want to give that up. Like that's a big stream of
True.
income, right? It makes it
Yeah,
very, very
it's a
sticky.
great point. And on the flip side too, as more regulation comes in, even though it can totally change the game for a lot of people, but if you can work with that regulation, then it actually presents a barrier to entry, to other kind of small time operators, which can be an advantage for somebody who is savvy and knows what they're doing in the space. So yeah, you can still work it. Still work it.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. Do you see any opportunities coming up in Florida? Like, would you consider investing in a place like Osceola County? The problem was it got
So
so saturated. It's like your 5-bedroom houses for $500,000 that only rented out for $100 a night.
yeah, exactly,
But maybe
exactly. I think
they're coming up for sale now. I don't know.
yeah, I think that we're going to see, we've seen kind of a correction on that. And the demand that we're hopeful, actually, we're hopeful that the demand in this coming year, once things settle with the pandemic, will really skyrocket, the demand for bookings, I should say. So the people that want to travel domestically, and then hopefully international picks up again. But we think that there's going to be a ton of people as soon as the parks are back up to capacity that are ready to go to Disney. They're ready to go back to Universal. And um, Orlando's going to be one of the hot travel destinations once again. For I think we're set up in this space for a great 3 to 5 year run. And so I actually think that you're going to see better returns again in the short-term rental space. And they're going to have to start to catch up with inventory again, because there's kind of been a changing of the guard with, like, there's a lot of older short-term rental homes and traditional short-term rental communities that have actually started to go more towards long-term and permanent housing.
Hmm.
And so the product has actually started to the market, I should say, the housing market there has started to correct itself. And I think with the increase um, in demand for Disney and travel to Orlando that we hope to see in 2021 and beyond, that you'll actually see much better returns in the general Osceola County kind of space.
You just think that they are going to be able to charge more for the nightly rate? Like there's going to be more people coming in that'll, even though you're paying a lot for these houses, the returns will be better just because you can increase your prices that much.
That's the optimist in me. The optimist in me is that we've actually seen some inventory that during this pandemic couldn't sustain the short-term rental, so they actually went permanent, or they converted to long-term rental. And so I think there's actually going to be an opportunity, because the inventory in theory has gone down some, but I expect the demand to actually really skyrocket when we do get a semblance of normalcy again. So that's the optimist in me, actually, is that you're going to see a little bit better rates of return in this
Hmm.
market.
Cool. Well, that's cool. Yeah, we got a little sidetracked, but I think that kind of stuff is important. I just want to talk about. But let's talk about CoThryve.
Yeah.
How did you come about having this idea? Like what is it exactly? And when did you first decide that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah. So CoThrive is leadership development for companies. And so we work with companies to help them build stronger leaders. And we have a unique model we call growth groups. And it's essentially, for a lot of your listeners that are more entrepreneurial minded, they might be more familiar with this concept, but it's essentially applying a mastermind group concept within a corporate, so within a company. So the whole mastermind group concept is when you get really smart, talented people. It's really popular in the entrepreneur community, but they give themselves a forum, they give themselves a structure to come together and tap into the mastermind by kind of pulling their minds together. And so the point of it is that they're sharpening each other, they're sharing their experiences, what's working well, what's not, and they're focused on growth. So growth oriented, smart people coming together to motivate and learn from each other, right? So we're taking that same concept and applying it in a corporate setting, and it's fairly innovative. We found out. So a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's really cool," but what does it mean? So it's that same general concept of helping a company tap into the power of its peers. So you've like a company invests a lot in recruiting top talent, and what we say is you actually have an underutilized resource there, and we call it collective leadership development. So when you give your high potential and your high performing team members, when you give them a forum to actually sharpen each other, and we guide them through a 12-month leadership curriculum. But really the magic happens in the dynamic of the peer-to-peer sort of engagement. So we're bringing great content, bringing tools and frameworks that helps them enhance their leadership. That's kind of normal sort of leadership programming, but we're doing it in a forum that really creates energy and momentum that helps them apply what they're learning and follow through on it.
Okay. And what kind of, when you say content, what kind of content are you bringing? Where do you get your content from?
Yeah,
Like,
so we kind of
make
split
it.
it. Yeah. So it's actually it's by and large our own. It is synthesizing some of the people who I think are the best of the best in some of these spaces. So big fan of Patrick Lencioni, if you know him. Craig Rochelle is one of my heroes. John Maxwell, one of my heroes. Liz Wiseman behind the Multipliers book and movement. Um, Pulling from the best of the best and synthesizing it in a way that is actionable and engaging for leaders. And we'll do it at any level of leadership. So it can be early career leaders, it can be mid-level managers. We're also working with leadership teams, more senior teams. Um, and but yeah, so we're trying to synthesize the best of the best, and uh, and provide it in a way that's actually, hey, we can make this real world applicable. And that's kind of what's unique about it, is taking good content and bringing it to life.
Okay. And so when you say the peer-to-peer network, like how are these people interacting with each other?
Yeah. So that's I know I described that's where the magic happens, but the structure of the forum is designed to bring out insights from the peers. And what the empirical kind of data will show you is that the most breakthrough learning happens when you have peers engaging and sharing their own experiences. So if you can bring them something that is insightful, that is like a powerful way to enhance their leadership. And so we basically split our modules into two parts. So one is what we call the increase, which is focused on how are you leading yourself. So a lot of personal growth, personal development, being the best personal leader that you can be. And the second part is how are you scaling your impact? We call it the overflow. So the increase, pouring in yourself, and then overflow out to others. How are you leading others well and scaling your impact? And this form it's kind of unique for a company, because typically when they're getting together with their team members, with your team, you're talking about projects, you're talking about things you talk about in a typical staff meeting. This is a forum to talk about leadership and talk about how you're growing as leaders. We get personal about our goals, so we help them map out. We have leadership growth plans. Everyone goes through and help them envision what is their leadership brand? What do they want to be known for as a leader? What kind of impact do they want to be having in their company, in their organization, 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And then a simple system, which we might want to dive more into, is we call it the 4x4 system, but it's a way to kind of operationalize their big goals. So after you've kind of mapped out, hey, this is the sort of leader I want to be. This is who I want to be as a leader. This is the kind of impact I want to have in my work, in my community, in my family. The 4x4 is a way to bring it to life and take bite-sized chunks out of your big goals month by month. So picture a monthly forum, and each leader is choosing 4 things that they're committing to getting done over the next 4 weeks. So 4x4. Every month you have your dashboard that everyone sees. So it's powerful. It's powerful because it gives the
That
individual
software
leader a
you provide.
system. It's actually, we use a simple shared free software that anybody can use. It's called Trello.
Okay.
It's a simple dashboard. It's a great, if a lot of your listeners probably have used it. It's a great kind of task list manager as well, a general kind of project management tool. But for our purposes, it works great because it allows each leader to have their own column on the dashboard. And month by month, you see what their 4x4 is. So you see what 4 things you're signing up for. And it's neat because it forces clarity and focus. That's kind of the first big benefit. It forces you to get clarity and focus on what are the 4 things out of my laundry list of things that I had to get done. What are the 4 things that are really going to move the needle for me and drive the most value? And for a company to have its high potentials or its leaders to force that clarity and focus month after month is so much more productivity happens so much quicker than it otherwise would because of that alone. You're 42% more likely to achieve a goal when you write it down because there's something powerful about getting that focus and articulating it to yourself, right? But then when you layer in the additional layer of accountability and really encouragement that comes from sharing it with your peers. So it's not only personal to you, but it's something that everyone's seeing month over month. You're able to say, wow, Austin signing up for those 4 things. That's pretty kick-ass. That's amazing. Jennifer signing up for that. That's pretty cool. So it gives a level of energy and then helps people keep momentum, because one thing you'll see, like when you're in this training and development space, it's amazing when you do a workshop and you see people light up. But unfortunately, a lot of times when you're doing those kind of one-off sort of trainings and workshops, people lose momentum after maybe 2 to 3 months, right? And maybe they remember certain parts of it, and that's great. But it's really hard to sustain momentum and when you don't have it coupled with some sort of structure or some sort of system. And that's what this model is all about. It's giving a structure and system to accompany the clarity and the goal planning.
Okay. Yeah. And I do want to, yeah, I think there's a lot of value to focus, like Warren Buffett,
Yeah.
Bill Gates, all those guys, they talk about just a value of focus. Everybody talks about it. So yeah, I think there's something to focusing on the important things, the 4x4 method. So that way I think more than anything, it's what not to focus on too, right? Like there's all the little stuff that like fills up your day that you can be like, okay, this is not one of my big goals. But yeah, before we keep diving into that, I'm just curious, like, how did this come about? Like, how did you get this idea? Was there like an early age where you had like your first entrepreneurial experience? Like, I'm just curious to hear
Yeah, I love that.
like that story.
I love that question. Yeah, so I've always kind of been wired as an entrepreneur, I feel like. So I started my own landscaping lawn mowing business back when I was 11 years old, and grew it to where I was employing some friends over high school and college. And so I always kind of had that entrepreneurial drive. And believe it or not, never saw myself doing this, but in college, after college, I ended up going into a big corporate, and never saw myself in corporate America, but it was actually an incredible leadership development program within a company. So we call them pipeline programs. So it's essentially meant to recruit top talent and equip them to have senior roles in the company in the future. It was a Fortune 250 company. Ended up doing this 4-year rotational program, spent time in operations, sales, marketing, spent a year in London, which was amazing to live abroad. And after the 4 years, I ended up taking a director role and then quickly tracked into an officer role in the company. And before I knew it, I was there almost a decade. So
Wow.
not being an entrepreneur, at least full time, but the whole time, one of the ways I was scratching that is first, I think that people can bring an entrepreneur mindset within any organization, within any company, that concept of entrepreneur. But second, it was real estate. So I started building a real estate portfolio probably about 6 years ago. And that was really the way I was scratching the entrepreneurial itch. Now, after all that, over the last 3 years in particular, I just found myself mentoring more and more aspiring leaders who really wanted to grow in their career, both in the community in Chattanooga where I was before, and also in my Fortune 250 company. And I loved it. I really loved it. And before I knew it, I had a dozen people I was meeting with, and I realized that, a great way to scale this is a mastermind kind of model, because I was involved in those personally, and a light bulb went off. And it's like, hey, I think this is actually it's actually be an incredible vehicle for helping companies develop leaders. And so CoThryve was born in 2019, and we're not looking back.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. So the Fortune 250 company, like how big were these guys? How many employees did they have?
Yeah, so this company is an employee benefits company, insurance, disability, life, sold to companies B2B, and we had about 10 to 11,000 employees. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so
big enterprise.
yeah, I can only imagine the learning curve that you had there in 10 years in a company of that size.
Yeah, and what I encourage people that are in a similar position is, if you're entrepreneurial minded, you can actually still thrive in a corporate, and it does matter what the culture is like, but it's also a function of how proactive you are and how much initiative you take and how you bring that to life in your company. So it definitely is a function of your environment. I get it. Some people can get frustrated in a big corporate setting, but for me, actually, I loved my company. I loved it, and I'm very thankful for the time I had there. It was an incredible experience, and the cool thing is I now work with them very closely on the
Oh,
CoThryve thing. They're one of my favorite and best clients. So they've
gotta
been they've been
congrats on
they've been
Amazon.
phenomenal. Yeah, exactly. So but yeah, I couldn't be more grateful for the experience, and honestly, for younger people that may be listening, I think it's great when people have an idea right out of college or right out of high school, even that they want to launch their own business, their own enterprise. I think it's phenomenal, but I also think it's a great option to work for an employer, even within a big company, and build what I like to call knowledge capital and financial capital. And so for me, it was an incredible experience over that decade to build experience and really knowledge of the way business works, and actually get a lot of meaningful leadership experience. And at the same time, I was able to build financial capital that allowed me to have a real estate portfolio, which gave way to a great transition into full-fledged entrepreneurship with CoThryve.
It was a stress-free transition because your needs were met through your real estate, right? So you could afford to not make a paycheck normally and still be able to survive with your family.
It buys you a lot of time when you're able to
Yeah.
set up enough income on the side, and it can be active income or it could be more passive income, which real estate investing typically is. But I'm a big advocate for that for people who are looking to make a transition. Is, keep applying yourself, kick as much tail as you can in your job, but build up on the side as much income as you can, so that it gives you, even if it doesn't fully cover you between your savings and that, it can give you enough runway to feel more freedom in taking risk.
That's interesting. Yeah, I like the way you worded that because a lot of people will save up money on the side, but you said save up income. And there's a difference there because you can save money, but it's not going to feed you forever, especially with all the inflation that we have seen, that we're going to see. I mean, I
It's a
heard,
great point.
yeah, like Richard, the guy I was talking about earlier, Richard Petit, he says, don't fight the Fed, right? Like they've made no indication they're going to let up printing money. So we can be upset about it. We can be upset that all of our money that we have is going to be deflated over time, or
Make smart
we can just
investments.
accept it and make decisions based on the information that we have. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Is like, instead of saving your money, but investing your money, especially because real estate is so safe. Like we all get caught up looking at the millionaires who made a fortune on because they bought Tesla at the right time, right? Or they
The
bought
Teslaires. Yeah.
and they bought these cryptocurrencies. And like, yeah, sure, people have done that, but
Yeah.
is that replicable? Is that
There's a
scalable? Is that manageable? Is it predictable? I mean, how many people, for everybody that makes the news that became a millionaire from a good stock pick, how many people crashed and burned, right? And how many of those
Oh
guys
man.
survived this test of time? It's like winning the lottery, like, are you going to be able to replicate
Yeah.
that skill?
No, you are spot on, Austin. And I think it's why more millionaires have been made in real estate than any other field.
Mhm.
It's the middle class person's way to build wealth. And like, I love your point on inflation, because it's such a good hedge for inflation, and it's still generating cash flow, but also appreciating in it. And especially if people are using leverage smartly, then it can actually benefit big time when there's inflation. And the last point I make is back to like that, building that nest egg. You're right, because you could have like a few $100,000 stocked away as a savings, but psychologically, it still hurts when you don't have money coming in and you're just
Yeah.
living off your savings, because it's not going to last forever. So that's why I really encourage people to build cash flow, build income on the side, because it helps you when you're making that transition. If you want to make the transition to full-time entrepreneurship, it just gives you more peace of mind to know that not only do I have hopefully some nest egg over here that I can draw on, but I also can sustain my life with income that's already been set up, it's running.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people who don't want to compromise their quality of life at all. It's like, oh, well, I don't want to buy a duplex and have to live in a half because then I have to deal with these other people. And it's like, well, like, that's fine, but you're paying for that quality of life. Like, especially at the
There's
beginning,
trade-offs.
as you get older and as you get more advanced in your career, like there's different stages of life that allow you to make different decisions. But if you never go through that stage of extreme self-sacrifice and long-term, gratification, like the opposite of instant gratification, then it'll take you longer to get to the point of significant wealth. So yeah, like I think if you can stomach, like that's what we did, like we had a duplex, wasn't that bad. We lived in half of it, put the other half on Airbnb, and it took away all the financial stress. Like literally overnight, almost all the financial stress was just evaporated because we knew that we would always have a place to live. We'd always be able
So
to
smart.
put on the table, no matter what, just because of that one cash flowing asset. And then that gives you freedom to invest in other things, right? And so there's a little bit of sacrifice, like the life, it's not like a glamorous lifestyle, but ultimately over time, it'll pay off. So yeah, I think it's smart for people to not just save their money, but okay, especially particularly in real estate. And I'm all about stocks. Don't get me wrong. Like I love investing in stocks, but if you don't know what you're doing, you can definitely get burned. And so yeah, I think there's a bigness about real estate. So yeah, that's cool that you're able to do that. And it's funny like how similar our paths kind of were.
I love that. I know. That's one of the biggest recommendations for younger people too. It's like, man, if you can, especially early on, if you can be intentional about the kind of house that you want to have, and if you get a duplex or even like a triplex or a quad, it is such a great way to start.
Yeah,
And even if it's just
doesn't
a
have to be
couple
forever.
of years, exactly. I love that model.
Yeah, like we still live in a duplex because it's just my wife and I. We don't have kids, not a big deal. When we get kids,
That's perfect.
we'll be set up to where we can have whatever house we, need whatever dream house, because we sacrificed, we put up with dealing with neighbors and tenants and that sort of thing for a period of time, so we wouldn't have to deal with that later on. So yeah, and so like earlier you mentioned something that I want to come back to. You mentioned that you've got the forum for these groups, and I agree, peer-to-peer networking is so beneficial. I used to have several fitness centers. I had 3 fitness centers down here in Orlando, and we were part of like a mastermind program. And there was a lot of new content that was coming out, like how to run your business and do ads and hire and do how to do sales and use Facebook marketing and all that, everything from A to Z.
Yep.
But a lot of that, there's just, you'll never learn everything, no matter what. Like
Right.
there's always new things to learn. And so even though technically, like on paper, everything was spelled out, there's still like how you can, there's a million different ways of how you could do those things. And it was during those interactions, like we're on part of a Facebook group where there's 1,000 gym owners on there. And we also had these like annual or sometimes twice a year meetings, like meetups. And there'd be content, there'd be presentations, but it was like talking to the people, other owners, gym owners that are actually doing it in between, networking with them. Like that was the most valuable part, right? And then like you see these really successful people and it's like, well, like, hold on, that guy, he's just like me. I mean, he puts his pants on, right leg, left leg, one at a time. Like he's sitting
Yep.
here, he eats lunch. Like there's not anything like crazy special about him. It's not like he's some super genius. Like, I could do that. So I think there's a lot of, tactical information, but then also just the motivational aspect of it too. Like it gives you belief that you can do this, that you can accomplish these things. So yeah, I was curious, like when you say forum, are you guys on a Facebook group? Do you have like a website that they all go on? I mean, how does that work in CoThryve?
Yeah, no, I love that you share the experience, because that just brings it to life for people even more. Like, what's the benefit um, in intentionally surrounding yourself with other growth oriented, talented people, especially if they're in your field, right? Yeah. So the way we run them for companies is it's honestly one of the silver linings to COVID is these groups used to be in person. And I love that, miss that. But to be honest, going virtual, being forced to go virtual, actually made the model a lot more scalable and even more cost effective, because now I'm not losing a day to travel and a day to the whole event. So I can beam in. We do a 90-minute Zoom call every month. So once a month, a 90-minute Zoom call. We got really creative for how do we still pack as much value as possible into that 90 minutes versus like what used to be a half-day session. And it's been amazing because we're still driving the same value. But it's for a lot cheaper because again, my time involved from losing the whole day is it's so much more scalable for me, but it's also more scalable for companies because now a company that maybe they were going to be able to do a couple of groups in their organization, now they can do 5 to 10 groups in the organization. So yeah, so it's a Zoom call, and then we have the dashboard that kind of supplements it throughout the month. And then one thing that we do that I would encourage people, if you're a part of a mastermind group, do this, is to make it even more micro. So our groups are up to 10 people. And but what we'll do is pair them up with what we call, bless you, with what we'll call a success partner, because it sounds so much more fun than an accountability partner. But your success partner is like a one-on-one pairing where you get to and we have, it's a part of our system where everyone schedules that meeting at the growth group meeting. So the monthly forum, you have your one-on-one with your success partner who's within that group, right? And you're going to meet somewhere in the middle of the month to debrief further on whatever topic we covered, whatsoever, go a little bit deeper together, as well as encourage and sharpen each other on the goals that you have and on the 4x4 for your month. So just it's a way to kind of make it even more micro, still having the great kind of forum dialogue with a 10-person group, but pairing up with a success partner makes it even more intimate and personal, and allows you to debrief on things that maybe you didn't have a chance to in the bigger forum.
That's cool. And so like, what's the typical business that comes to work with you? Like, is there a certain set of parameters that makes it a good fit, like an industry or a size or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, we can do this across any industry, and we've done some blue collar recently, which is really neat. But typically, it is more white collar, tech and financial services actually. But it really can be done in any company that values developing leaders and values pouring into their leaders. And one of the things that we say about it for companies is it's not just about, not only do we think it's the most effective vehicle for sustainably developing leaders, because it actually, again, it helps them unlock learning in a new way given the forum, but it also helps them keep momentum and apply what they're learning with the structure and the systems we use. Not only that, though, it's also a chance to help a company win at culture. And so it really increases camaraderie, a deeper sense of connection to each other on the team, but also to your company. So all that to say, it can be done with any industry. There's kind of 2 ideal client profiles. One is a small to medium sized company that they have somebody who's in charge of HR and people, but they likely don't have the capacity to invest in strategic talent development and leadership development in the way that they want to, because they're too busy running the operations, or too busy making sure payroll happens, or too busy doing compliance sort of stuff. And we're a kind of a natural sort of strategic partner for them in that effort to outsource to and to work with. The other ideal client profile would be a larger Fortune 500 or a larger company that already spends millions on development, but realizes that they need to optimize, and they're struggling with attrition or retention, or they're struggling with actually producing the results that they want to see. People aren't following through on their development. And we can come in and really partner with them, layer on, not be duplicative, but give them something new and innovative that helps them drive the results that they want to see.
Okay. And so what kind of trends are you seeing, like dealing with multiple industries and multiple businesses? I mean, is there any patterns that you're seeing in 2021 already, or COVID, or anything that you care to share?
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody knows about remote work and how that's obviously exploded. It's kind of forced it to explode. And it's funny because everyone loves that we have that flexibility now, but there's a lot of people who are actually yearning for the office as well. So it's good to be mindful of that. There's a few trends on this front. One is back to that point around connectedness. We're seeing an increase in disconnection. And when I say that, I mean like engagement rates, people feeling more disconnected from their job, from their teams. And that's natural. It's to be expected when we aren't co-located. But there are ways that you can work on that. We're seeing actually increase in loneliness at work, which is crazy and kind of a concerning trend. We are seeing an increase in burnout rates, which is interesting because for as much as people love the flexibility and appreciate the flexibility of being able to spend more time at home and with their families, maybe they could have lunch with their kids, which is amazing. Um, the flip side to that has been that there is no longer an artificial divide between work and home. So used to you would go to the office, and even if you worked a long day at the office over hours, you at least were going to leave at some point and go home. And you were in a new environment, and you were able just to more easily kind of disconnect from the work and have more balance in your life. And we've seen a lot of people struggle with that. So that's been a growing trend is again, even though they have more at their fingertips, they're more distracted at home in some ways, but they also aren't good at the boundaries and balance aspect of being able to have their home life and their work life. So that's another thing that we've seen as a growing trend, and we've been working with companies on.
Mm. Oh, that's good. All right. So, and then like, in terms, there's a lot of trends and issues. Like, do you have any advice for people how to solve those problems? Like if they're, say, for instance, they have burnout or something like that.
Yes, growth groups. That is the way. No, really, it comes back to it comes down to creating forums, though. It comes down to creating forums where we don't have the water cooler anymore, right? So, what kind of forums are you creating virtually for your people to get to know each other and talk on a more personal basis? And
Mm.
so, whether you do a growth group or not, giving them a forum to, number one, just connect, not in a typical staff meeting sort of way, but just to connect, and also giving them a forum to focus on their personal growth and development as leaders. I think that's key. And what we find, honestly, is that the people, our participants in these growth groups, it becomes their favorite employee benefit. So, and that's when I think that's when I think a company is doing development right, people development, leadership development right, is when it's not something that people are like, oh my gosh, my manager wants me to go through this program. I got to check the boxes for HR on this training program. But when they look at it like, holy cow, my company thinks so highly of me that they want to invest in me in a really meaningful way. They want to see me thrive as a person, as a leader, and they believe in my potential and my impact at this company. That's when you nail it. So creating structure and forums where that happens, that's the key.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so aside from that, if you had one piece of advice that you'd like to impart on everybody listening, what would that be?
Honestly, because we're kind of at the beginning of a new year, and I'm all for big goals. I'm a big advocate for big goals. It's a James Clear quote that I absolutely love, and he says something to the effect of, "If you really care about the goal, you should focus on the system. If you really care about the goal, you should focus on the system." And so it's really great to do the goal planning. It's really great to get clarity on what's important to you. But if you don't have a system for achieving that goal, then, and hopefully this applies to a lot of your listeners who are, I'm sure, very goal oriented with what they want to do in real estate. But if you don't have a system for achieving that goal, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, is to think about your system. And so I'm a huge advocate for what we do with the 4x4 system, but that doesn't have to be your system. Whatever your system is that gives you some structure and gives you some way to not only kind of get the clarity of what's important for you, but to also keep momentum. And I will say one of the biggest keys for a system to work is having some sort of community and accountability. So back to the whole concept of a peer group. And even if it's just one person, if you have your own kind of individual success partner, share your goals with them. So what we do with our 4x4s is we're sharing those monthly with each other and with other people we work with outside of companies. At the very least, share your 4x4 with a friend, and hopefully they're sharing one with you back. And it just kind of creates another level of commitment for you when you've spoken it out loud to someone else, and they know what you're trying to achieve. And yeah, so the tragic stat is that there's only 8% of people that fulfill their New Year's resolutions. And that's sad, because I think it's a good thing to set New Year's resolutions. Actually, there's a lot of haters and cynics out there, but it's a good thing to set them. But have a system. It underscores the importance of a system to help you actually follow through.
Yeah, I like that. And a quote that I heard that I think hammers in on that, or hones in on that, is you don't rise to the level of your ambition, you fall to the level of your systems.
I love that.
And it's like,
So
you have
true.
ambitious goals but no systems, no accountability, then chances of you hitting it is very, very slim.
So true, man.
Well, cool. So if people want to get in touch and reach out to you, they're interested, they like what you do, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, the best way is finding me on LinkedIn. So Blake Bozarth on LinkedIn. We also have an Instagram for Leadership on Purpose. The podcast for sure. That's the way that we're delivering content. So it's all about helping leaders lead with confidence and with humility. So we feature executives and CEOs who are sharing their stories and sharing practical. We try to make every episode as practical as we can to equip more leaders. But that would be the best way between the podcast and LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, Blake, this has been fun. Thanks so much for your time. I'd love to catch up again here in a few months and see how things are going with you.
Awesome, Austin. Thanks for having me on, man.